A new measure was announced this week to try and help stimulate the housing market, and it marks the third one that came out just this month. We ultimately may hear of even more of these to come as the pre-sale market continues to struggle immensely. I've got some shocking new numbers to share with you about recent sales volumes. Plus, we saw another major project go insolvent. I also have updates on where markets are pricing in potential Bank of Canada rate hikes. Plus, there is an incredible theory that has emerged this week as to why the government is making these land agreements with Indigenous groups. It is one that I think very few expected, definitely myself included in that. It has been a whirlwind week in real estate. Here's what you need to know. First up, I'm happy to share that our Cold-to-Cut project has just sold its first unit. These are beautiful detached homes in the city of Burnaby. We are excited, of course, for this first family to join the community that we are building. There are 3 homes remaining, and if you are looking for the best priced brand new detached homes in Burnaby, definitely check that out. Okay, let's now talk about more tax relief within housing. Because of course, earlier this month, we saw the government announce that initiative in Ontario where they were partnering with a private equity firm to bulk buy newly completed homes to help bail out, stimulate the market there, and definitely help out some developers. Then, just last week, we saw the increase in the GST relief. There was an incentive there for new homes for first-time homebuyers. Then, this week, on Thursday, March 26, Ontario released their annual budget. And within that, it has extended the incentive to all newly built homes under $1 million. And this is to all buyers, not just first-timers. And it includes those buying for investment purposes or ultimately rentals. So you can buy as a first timer, you can buy it as an investment. And what it does, it essentially removes the whole HST, right? So we're talking about a 13% reduction in tax. So on $1 million, I mean, that provides a $130,000 rebate for those buyers. Under this new plan, new homes in Ontario worth up to $1.5 million would also remain eligible for that maximum $130K rebate. And on top of that, reduced rebates would be available for homes worth as much as $1.85 million. So this is a considerable incentive. When Gregor Robinson, the housing minister, was asked, he mentioned, first and foremost, we're in a housing crisis, and we've got to use all the tools we have available to support the market and to build as much affordable housing as we can, is what he told the Globe and Mail. When asked if the federal government is striking deals with other provinces, Mr. Robertson replied, stay tuned. So we may see similar incentives expand into other provinces. The deal here, it's going to come into effect on April 1st, and the incentive currently will last for 1 full year. So we've now seen essentially 3 levers pulled in a calendar month that will attempt to stimulate the sort of pre-con and pre-construction housing market. Will there be more? Well, time will tell. Let's talk about land claims now, because there has been some interesting claims on Twitter or X regarding the real reason that the recent land rights agreement was made. Some believe that BC just quietly exposed the reason, and it's not about reconciliation or healing or shared prosperity. It's about shifting the control of Canada's critical resources into a 3-way partnership. And this would be between the Indigenous groups, activist governments, i.e. the BC NDP, Ottawa's Liberal Party, and of course, Mark Carney. And lastly, foreign investors, especially China. There is a document that has been circulating. It's called the BC First Nations China Strategy. It's a document that outlines a strategic approach to strengthening economic and cultural ties between BC First Nations and Chinese interests. While it primarily focuses on business opportunities, the strategy has significant implications for land rights and Aboriginal title in British Columbia. I'll put a link to that document in the show notes below if you want to have a look. Now, based on the strategic framework outlined by the BC First Nations Energy and Mining Council, China's role is envisioned as a primary partner for foreign direct investment through the legal ability to buy land or rights, which are strictly governed by Canadian constitutional law and the principles of Aboriginal title. So, I mean, by now you're already asking, can Chinese interests straight out buy land or rights? Well, the short answer appears to be no. They cannot buy Aboriginal title or the underlying land rights in the traditional sense of like a fee simple real estate transaction. But instead of ownership, the strategy focuses on joint ventures and equity positions. In these models, the First Nations retain its rights and title while the Chinese partner provides the capital and expertise to develop the resource under a profit sharing or lease agreement. Now, of course, Chinese investors, they can buy into things like BC Mines today, but this is definitely looking to expand upon that. So while China already remains a bit of a dominant force within the global mineral supply chain, recent and somewhat new Canadian federal policies have created a more restrictive environment for direct acquisitions, particularly within the critical mineral space. On March 26, a report came out that kind of supports this theory, if you will. The Bureau states in part, the provincial government's implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, or DRIPA, combined with a series of landmark court decisions confirming Aboriginal title over specific territories, has rapidly altered the legal landscape governing resource extraction in Western Canada. More land is now subject to Indigenous control. More projects require Indigenous consent. These are, in principle, corrections to historical wrongs, but they also mean that the pathways to Canada's most strategically valuable resources, lithium, cobalt, rare earth elements, timber, and LNG, now runs, in many cases, directly through First Nations governments. Beijing, acutely interested in North American court procedures, has obviously noticed. So this is leading some to believe that Carney is essentially handing over land rights to Indigenous groups who in turn sell those rights to the Chinese. The Bureau goes on to state, Canada's public has not yet recognized or reckoned seriously with the fact that Beijing seeks to negotiate directly with Indigenous peoples worldwide, from Australia to Taiwan, seeking to undermine democratic sovereignty. And this strategy has gathered alarming pace in Mark Carney's Canada. So these agreements that are taking place with Indigenous groups and the government may be this almost backdoor access for the Chinese to come in and purchase mineral rights, for example. Now, I'm obviously no lawyer. I don't know if these have actual legal binding enforcement. Maybe I should just put on the tinfoil hat here. But it does appear to have a potential for Indigenous groups to claim title to land and then create equitable partnerships with the Chinese over those lands. We will see how this continues to unfold as new news seems to be coming out almost daily regarding this. Shifting into the rental market now, Live.Rent is out with the March numbers for Vancouver. One bedroom unfurnished rentals are now going for $2,061 on average. That is down $245 year over year, or 12%. I mean, this is a big number. Rentals.ca shows nationally, rents are down 2.8% year over year, but that marks a 33-month low. And year over year rents have now declined for 17 straight months. The average for all unit types in Vancouver sits at $2,672 per month, with all of Vancouver down 7.6% year over year. This is the largest drop of all the major metros in the country, which is followed by Toronto at 5.3%. Importantly now, BC has seen 19,628 people leave the province last year in 2025. That amount is up 32% year over year and accounts for 21% of all the emigration within Canada last year. This is colliding with a record amount of purpose-built rentals coming to the marketplace, and that equates to like 16% of the entire rental stock in our province is under construction. It's the highest of any province in the country. So we've got a record amount of people leaving. At the same time, a record amount of rentals are becoming available. I think this is a serious case for rental rates to drop further and further, and possibly quite dramatically over the coming months, and definitely longer should this rate of emigration continue. This will result, I think, in more and more investors leaving the space. I mean, you just simply are running pro formas that are tight today with the projections for the rental side of it, the revenues to drop even further. We're definitely going to see the mom and pop investor likely flee this space, and institutional level investors are going to see their numbers diminish further. causing stresses in that space. So speaking of further stresses within the development space, it seems like developments that are going into foreclosure is almost a weekly announcement now. So here's this week's. Last week, we saw Quadrille initiated foreclosure proceedings against Celtic Brighouse West Business Park in Richmond. So this is a 27-acre business park with 17 businesses on it. It was purchased in 2021, forget this, $300 million. It was by far the largest transaction that year. Now, the plan for that space was to develop 1,833 residential units of condos, and then both market and below market rentals. There was going to be 118,000 square feet of retail, 335,000 square feet of office, plus almost 6.5 acres of green space, like parks, that was going to be contributed back to the city of Richmond. There were going to be amenities, including a seniors facility, karaoke, and badminton. And the project was estimated to take about 10 to 15 years to fully realize. Now, Quadrille didn't say when Celtic first defaulted, but did mention that they have missed interest payments now. They have failed to pay property taxes, and they were able to add a secondary mortgage to the property. The debt owed to Quadrille is upwards of $188 million. Now, the assessed value of these properties is upwards of $244 million, though it's uncertain, of course, if when they go to try and resell this property, if they will achieve that number. Either way, it's yet another story of a development going into foreclosure in Greater Vancouver. Expanding now on other areas of real estate and real estate companies that are having trouble. Well, there is an investment platform that has essentially gone bankrupt. It's called Addy. And this is a company that essentially lets you invest as little as $1 into fractional ownership of a real estate development. Addy had raised $94 million through their platform. And for further understanding, Addy's model was to run a crowdfunding campaign for an investment in residential or commercial real estate. They would raise as little as $250,000 up to $1 million for each project. The money was used to buy shares in a limited liability company that would then give the money to the property owner, typically in return for an ownership percentage of that entity that owned or operated the real estate or development property. Now, it failed ultimately, right? And Addy's fall is believed to be driven by mainly the failure of its investments in the new residential construction, right? Many of which have had to pause or be scrapped by the plunge in demand for new homes across the country, as we talk about at length. On February 24th, the CEO of Addy, Stephen Jagger, sent an email that stated in part, given the company's financial position and how insolvency priorities work, shareholders in Addy Technology Corp should expect to lose their investment. We're stating this plainly because anything softer would risk creating false hope. So they've essentially just said nobody who's invested it through their platform should expect any money back. $94 million gone. There's a risk in investing in anything, of course, but this is just another cautionary tale that be very, very cautious and do your diligence into what you are investing in. Shifting into Vancouver pre-sales now, that market continues to struggle. The February data just came out, and honestly, it's just shocking. Like, only 3 projects were launched last month, but get this, it only totaled 64 units because, of course, all the 3 projects, they were townhomes, right? We're not talking about 3 towers that were released. These are just townhomes because there's still some absorption taking place there. Though not much, right? The sell-through rate in February was only 6%. That's obviously very low and would be considered deep into a buyer's market. Now, this follows the month of January, where 3 projects were released totaling 145 units. Now, for March, which is typically, a strong month for sales and for project launches, only 1 project with 29 homes are coming to market. So let's have some fun here. Let's play a game. Let's take a guess. How many units were launched pre-sale in March of 2022? Okay, compared to the 29 units that came to market this month. That answer, 2,066. I mean, that means there are 98.6% less units launching this month compared to March of 2022. Understandably, with the continued almost decimation of pre-sales here, developers are simply just not bringing projects to market, right? As they need to wait for a stronger market, a rising market, or at least one where people can afford to buy these homes. So let's shift into interest rates now and see what the markets are thinking about the state of the world and what the Bank of Canada might do. Obviously, starting this year, it looked that all of 2026, no rate movement at all. But that shifted, of course, with the war here, and potential rate hikes have been the talk of the town lately. So markets are saying next announcement is April 29th, and there's currently a 25% chance of a hike. That increases to a 50% chance of a hike by the June 10th announcement. But get this, when we look out to September, there's a 38% chance of 2 quarter-point rate hikes. So plan your mortgage accordingly. Lastly now, as the month of March is almost wrapped up here, we've got a pretty good insight into what the sales volumes and the prices are going to do for this month. And I always like giving you guys sort of the early look as to what the stats are going to be. So we are on track right now for about 2,050 sales for the month of March. And that will actually be the highest sales volume in 5 months. Looking back from last year, it's going to drop about 2%-ish. We'll see where it all washes out. But let's be honest here, we're still tracking well below the long-term average. It'll probably be like 30% below long-term, something like that. Prices, we've got median prices currently up about 23,000 month over month, whereas average is down 7,000 month over month. So still a few days of sales to see how this all pans out, but that's kind of what you can expect. I think we'll hear a lot of people talking about sales volumes, again, being the highest in 5 months as being a bit of a story, but always look to the bigger picture and the long-term averages for that real understanding of what's happening. Thanks for watching as always. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you here next week. Take care.